Now you can see that it's getting darker. It's 6:30 here and it's cloudy because it's the monsoon season, but we must continue to talk about what we can do about climate change. And we have been saying don't fly, it's very expensive. Don't drive in a car, take the bus, take the train. Everything has some details. If only 10 people take the train and the entire train is running empty, of course that's not so great. But let's move ahead and talk about flying to flying. Anyway, once upon a time, explorers, pirates, and merchants sailed across the sea without leaving behind a gram of CO2. They were just using winds. After the invention of the steamboat and later the motorboat, the wind did not stop blowing, but we just started to use more and more fossil fuels, and some boat makers are now doing their best to emit less CO2 again. But of course sailing depends on the winds and you cannot go very fast, but motorboats can take you there very fast and carry lots and lots of load. Remember the duckies that fell into the Pacific Ocean? Those are monster ships that carry many tons of goods from one continent to the other across the ocean. They are conducting tests now, the boats with ships that have been uh, fitted with sails as well as engines, so when they're in the middle of the ocean, if there is strong wind, they can turn down the engine and just sail across. Some of the sails are almost unrecognizable. They are more the shape of an airplane wing standing upright on the deck because they are made more efficient with a lot of research in the laboratories that may take up less space than the old-fashioned sail, and it works better too. It's much more efficient in using the winds to propel itself forward or turn and steer the directions, change the directions. There are even cargo ships that do a kind of kite surfing. They save energy thanks to huge kites more than 100 meters up in the sky that helps to pull the ship along, because these ships are very heavy and very big. Inventions like these show that some companies really are trying hard to emit less CO2. That's a good thing because more and more boats are coming along every day because we are getting more and more things from far away. So let's say this is a nice company called Ecoliner, which is carrying cargo, but it has these nice tall vertical airplane wing looking sails that can make it kite or fly along. The same is true for air travel. Just take a look at Flight Radar 24 website or the app. Use your mom's help to do that, or your brother or sister. Skies are absolutely full of planes, and that is no wonder. Flying is a bizarrely cheap mode of transportation. Now you can hop from one place to another for a fairly cheap ticket. For less than $200 you can fly from New York to Toronto, and you can get there quickly, other than getting to the airport, waiting at the airport, and sometimes a flight is delayed or cancelled and so on. But the plane would be emitting far more CO2 than a bus or a train traveling the same distance. So if you went from New York to Toronto by bus or a train, it would be emitting much less than a plane, but you would get there much faster. So making it more expensive to fly can make many people change their option and take the bus or the train. But then you will be punishing somebody who wants to get there quickly because he has government business or she has other business and so on. The people would be less likely to hop on the plane if the flights were not so cheap, but governments and airlines are far too happy with all those travels, and so the prices stay low because they can make profit if more and more people fly. Some airlines, though, are looking for cleaner sources of energy. They are working on electric planes. The problem is that there are no power sockets in the air, so when you're up in the air and flying around, you cannot charge the battery. So all the energy has to travel with the plane in a battery when it takes off, and you have to make sure that the battery lasts long enough to get you from New York to Toronto. Cannot go in the middle of the sky and say, oh, the battery has run out. The more energy, heavier the battery, which means the plane gets heavier when you want to go longer and longer distance flying on a battery. And the heavier the battery, the more energy you need to stay in the air. So batteries will have to become lighter and lighter as well. This all gives you an opportunity, kids, as you grow up. You think of batteries, lighter batteries, long lasting batteries, environmentally safe batteries, and so on. Flying on biofuel seems to be the best solution for now. Now, what is biofuel? When you burn wood, that is a kind of a biofuel. The wood has carbon captured by photosynthesis by the tree. When you burn it, you're going to release that CO2 back. So you can grow corn and you can make ethylene out of corn or out of sugar cane and use that as the fuel, or you can mix it with other fuels to make fuel more environmentally friendly as well. But always remember that growing biofuels means you are also taking space from agriculture, where you could be growing grains, which means the grain prices may go up. And it's always complicated. Everything we do is complicated. But the old frying fat, for example, can also be converted to biodiesel. All that oil that the McDonald's and other restaurants use for frying up the burgers can be, it usually gets wasted or thrown away, and it has to be disposed of very carefully, because otherwise it will contaminate the water and the soil and so on. But if somebody can pick it up and make biodiesel out of it, that will be great. If you ever happen to fly from Los Angeles, you might find that engine smell a little like a snack bar. There's a local factory that turns frying fat into kerosene for planes. That's great, because the fat comes from the planes that absorbed a lot of CO2 when they were alive, right? The fat comes from plants, not planes. I read it completely wrong. So using kerosene produced from the frying fat is great, because the fat comes from plants that absorbed a lot of CO2 when they were alive. So you are just releasing back the CO2, so you are not producing new CO2. So if you burn fat again, it doesn't add anything extra to the air. Of course, there are other issues about what it is emitting. Is it safe, and what does it completely burn away, or some residue is left behind, and so on. So here is a train ticket price, Euro 50, producing 50 kilograms of CO2 emissions, returning to Paris. And here is a plane ticket, return ticket to Paris, 50 euros as well, cheap, but it's producing 500 kilograms of CO2 emissions. Now you know why you need to take the train. But you have to be careful, because you are not the only one flying on the plane. You are not the only one taking the train. The train has to be full, the plane has to be full. So you have to also think about per person how much CO2 is being produced. Okay, frying fat, but planes still swallow huge amounts of fuel, and increasing population and wealth means that number of flights is constantly increasing. So a number of countries have agreed to compensate for the CO2 emissions for their planes. That means when you fly, you ask your parents, they will say, the airline will say, do you want to pay a little extra to offset the CO2 you're emitting by flying? So somebody will plant a tree somewhere to reduce the amount of CO2 that you are emitting. So here, frying fat, kerosene and electricity coming for the airplanes, and the bird is thinking about the French fries and so on. So a frying fat is in its mind, right? So airplanes companies want to reduce their emission. They can do this, for example, by planting trees to absorb CO2, or donating solar panels to a village to reduce the CO2 that you are emitting. You can do the same thing when you fly somewhere, by the way. For less than $10, you can arrange to have 5 trees planted, enough to offset a one-way flight from Vancouver, British Columbia to Miami, Florida. Someone has to make sure that they took your money and actually planted the tree and didn't lie about it. But of course, it's even better to plant a tree and not fly to Miami at all, or plant 10 trees that will keep you busy, but also there may be a good reason why your parents want to take you to Miami or Vancouver and back to Miami, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we'll come back and talk about electric vehicles, another way that we can reduce emissions. The number of electric vehicles is growing and growing and growing, and now you see that I'm sitting here in the dark looking like a ghost with this black t-shirt and so on, but we'll come back and talk about electric vehicles. Okay, so this is all good news, right? Maybe we are doing lots of things to reduce emissions and still have some fun. It's not fun if you have to stop everything because climate change is bad. You must find way to enjoy life without spoiling the environment, without increasing carbon dioxide and methane and so on. And it's evening, so you can see lots of birds that are shouting. It's very nice. I will see if it is coming into the podcast as well. See you, kids.